Hey guys, Anthony and Kate here.
Hey, good evening. Welcome.
This is episode 8 of the All Things Esoteric podcast. Today we're going to talk about Saturn. But first, Kate's going to give us the Astral update.
All right, well, thank you. It's good to be here and closing out the year, just share some information. If you're with us and listened last week, I kind of covered quite a bit about what was going on, but just to recap, we're looking at that full moon in Gemini that occurred December 18th. The Eastern Standard Time was 11:34, and the same themes that have been occurring all year with the Saturn-Uranus squares. We have the themes of fixed energies and relationships, people and places and things, and our attachment to things have been under examination and questioned and strained and stretched and shifted and drastically changed, I believe, some of us, due to decisions that had to be made to really survive the blur, I would say, of 2020 to 2021. So Saturn makes its last square, its final square. So it had its first square, let me find the date on that, February 17th. The second square was June 14th. And the third square is going to be December 23rd. And this is that battle between the familiar past and the unknown future, wanting to Saturn, which we're going to talk about tonight, stay, keep us, let the karmic pattern completely come off of us before we move forward in Uranus. The rebel, revolter, Aquarius, reaching, ever reaching, wanting to go out, 11th house themes. So we've had this push-pull energy that's been very, very challenging. Like you go and then you have to stop because things have been changed again. So with all that comes some equilibrium and equilibrium issues, I would say, and unsure footing. So I just want to talk about for a minute the last week. I tell you, I, during this Gemini full moon, experienced what's called the Ascension Flu. You familiar with this, Anthony?
No, I've never heard of it. It was the first time when you talked about it.
Yeah, I actually didn't, really didn't. I just thought it was COVID, to be honest with you, for sure. I had a runny nose for one day. The next day, it went away and I had a sore throat. Then that went away. And the next day, I had a headache. And when I woke up, I had extreme vertigo. I thought I had a stroke, to be honest with you. Checked all the things for a stroke. That I didn't have a stroke, but I kept having this vertigo, and I was in this spaciness. And the only way I can explain it is like a dream state, as if I was completely enveloped in Neptune. I cannot explain this. And I was getting very concerned, and my husband would come home and I was just spacey. So I was like, I wonder if I should, go to a doctor. But I said, no, something told me to wait and just rest and just be. But I could not do anything that required a lot out of me. And so I did the moon video. Believe it or not, I had a moment of clarity within those 4 days. And right before the 17th, I was able to channel a beautiful message, but I was never able to get it uploaded in time. I couldn't finish the editing because I just was somewhere else. And if I know that sounds crazy, and believe me, even saying it sounds crazy because I don't even like to say it because it's embarrassing, because I like to be more logical. My Saturn's in my third house. I have a logical...
Just blame it on the moon.
No, I didn't, and I didn't want to just blame it on the moon. But you know what? When I looked at my chart and its transits, and I'm not going to go into all that, it was clearly a moon-on-moon situation of epic proportions, galactic center, almost touching galactic center point. It was just too obvious that I believe I was being cleared of some really serious karma, and that's leading us into Saturn here in a minute, and how I can't even tell you how timely this planet is in having experienced what I did this week. And my Saturn return is coming up in a few months. My second Saturn return is a monument time.
Also with Saturnalia being around right now.
Yes. I mean, it's crazy to me that we're talking about this because I had a Saturn moment today and really felt released from a lot of things that just some clarity that came in. It's coming in waves ever since this whole event took place. So anyway, I went online, you guys, and I actually got bold enough to ask somebody about this on Facebook. I thought, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to do it. So I explained everything, and I got so many hits and links to so many people going through this, getting these downloads, and they're getting flu symptoms. And what's crazy is they think it's COVID, but they're not sure. Some are vaccinated, some aren't. So it's like, it's a crazy kind of situation. I'm slowly getting back to normal, but it started up again a little bit today, but then it went away. When I started getting into Saturn, I became, into Saturn's energy, which demands a much more serious, cold, detached approach. And so he really helped me today to see a lot of things. So with that, we've got, of course, the eclipses and the full new moons that have happened this year, and their individual messages that are coming to an end here. And again, it's been these themes of Venus, relationships, and the second house earthly position and the seventh house air positions of Venus. How we love things in our lives that are very personal, second house. How do we value things? What do we do with things? And how do we treat people and relationships and value our exchange with one another? That would be Libra, air energy. Chiron, move forward. That was really big. I want to mention that again. Out of this 5-month retrograde this month, and it's ending the cycle for those especially with Aries sun, ascendant moon, and a Chiron in Aries. And so a lot of energy is being released to move forward in this healing. We've got this Venus in Capricorn coming out of retrograde, then going back and hitting again, coming out of retrograde, then hitting back, really wanting us to deal with, I think, the wounds and let them go, so to speak, which is timely with Saturn because it's all about karma and release. So with Chiron moving forward, we've also got the added energy to just really release and go into the new year. And then I talked about the final square in Saturn and Uranus. And then on December 28th, Jupiter returns to Pisces. It's going to go back into Pisces, asking us just really to, it's interesting, all this is around Christmas. Pisces is that higher spiritual vibration, asking us to have faith in our ideals so that they can manifest, like to believe when it's most hard to believe, and to keep believing, and don't base it on feeling. Capricorn and Venus, don't base things on feeling. Have a more serious Saturnian look towards your relationships, a more sober look, a less expecting of others to do for you, and a more you kind of sitting up and saying, what can I do for me to be a better person so then I can add value to the relationship I'm already in. It's that kind of energy. And we're moving into the age of Aquarius, and I started doing some digging on that, and I thought, wow, that's a whole nother podcast, I think, when an appropriate time comes. Some say we're in it. Some say it's coming. Some say it started in 2012 with the whole Mayan thing. But we are seeing some very strong Capricornian and Piscean themes leave with Pluto in Capricorn releasing finally in 2024 and going into Aquarius. This is huge. Pluto is the furthest planet out, the longest travel, 248 years. So with Pluto going into Aquarius, it's a whole new ball game. Very exciting time. But we've got, 2 more years before that really happens. A lot of going forward, a lot of coming back. And I just want to say the winter solstice starts tomorrow at 10:59 a.m. And it is so appropriate to be doing Saturn when the winter solstice is tomorrow, right?
Yes.
All right, anything you want to add to that?
Nope, that was wonderful.
Okay. Well, I'm going to dive into astronomy quick then, like I do, and a little bit of mythology, and then we'll see if you want to jump in, and we'll go from there. All right, so this is a lot of this out of a book that I own, Astronomy, The Definitive Guide to the Universe. And I also got some things off Wikipedia, and also, because I don't know a lot about astronomy, but I'm finding it very important to know in relation to astrology. You know, it's kind of like they go hand in hand. So Saturn,
oftentimes there are interesting synchronicities, like last week with the Force.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
So
Mars actually being full of iron, and iron has always been attributed to Mars.
Right on. Well, Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun, and it is the 2nd largest. So we got Jupiter last week, and now we're doing Saturn. It's a gas giant, and its average radius is about 9.5 times that of Earth. But it only has 1/8 the average density of Earth. But with its larger volume, Saturn is over 95 times more massive. So it's named after the Roman god of wealth and agriculture. Very important tie-in to Saturn, even in astrology. It's traced back to the Oxyrhynchus papyri. Have you heard of this?
No.
This is a group of manuscripts that was discovered during the late 19th and early 20th centuries by papyrologists Bernard Pine Grenfell and Arthur Surridge Hunt at an ancient rubbish dump near Oxyrhynchus, apologize for the slaughter, in Egypt. And I actually Googled how to say that before I started, but with all the talk we've been having, it is gone. It was not in long term. So the manuscripts date from the Ptolemaic 3rd century BC and Roman periods of Egyptian history from 32 BC to the Muslim conquest of Egypt in 640 AD. These are old. Old. And they just cover things like public and private documents, codes, edicts, registers, official correspondence, census, tax assessments, petitions, court records, sales, leases, wills. This is off of Wikipedia here. Bills, accounts, inventory, horoscopes, and private letters. Wouldn't it be amazing to read this stuff? I would love to study this.
Yeah.
But the Saturn symbol in Saturn himself makes so much sense, leading him the charge of the 10th house of career would be show up within court documents and registers and private and public documents, right? And tax assessments and whatnot. It makes sense that it would show up. So the Romans named the 7th day of the week Saturday after Saturn. Saturn's interior is most likely composed of core of iron, nickel, and rock, silicon, and oxygen components. And its core is surrounded by a deep layer of metallic hydrogen, an immediate layer of liquid hydrogen and liquid helium, and finally a gaseous outer layer. So it looks pale yellow, kind of like yellow to pale yellow, due to the ammonia crystals in the upper atmosphere. So a lot of this, I found out, like I said, on Wikipedia was absolutely fascinating. The magnetic field is around 1/20th of Jupiter's. The outer atmosphere is generally bland and lacking in contrast, although long-lived features can appear, and the wind speeds reach 1,100 miles per hour. My goodness. Higher than on Jupiter, but not as high as Neptune. Of course, it has the ring system. They consist of countless small particles. This was fascinating to me. I did not know what the rings consisted of. I thought they were asteroid pieces. Here's what happened. A moon hit into Saturn. Some kind of cataclysm occurred, and the particles busted up, and they formed these rings, and in between the rings are smaller moons. And the magnetic pull of these moons keep these rings in place.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy. And I think it has, where did I read? It has a lot of moons. Is it 50 moons? something like that. But it's really fascinating to see the persisting hexagonal wave pattern around the North Polar Vortex. It is a hexagon, and it literally is at the North Pole of Saturn, and it just rotates.
Wow.
Yeah, and we got the Hubble telescope and the Cassini space probe pictures that are online, and it's absolutely fascinating because Cassini was able to go all the way around Saturn for the first time. So just guys, take a look at the North Pole hexagonal wave pattern. I know it's a polar vortex. There's something going on with that. I sense it. You know what? I don't know exactly. Do we have time to really study that? No. But it'd be pretty cool to do that, you know, and take a look at it. So it has 83 known moons, 53 of which have formal names. So it's got those dozens to hundreds of little moonlets, too, that are inside the rings. And so Titan is the largest moon, so he's got a lot going on. Saturn is not alone out there. It has a lot of moons. I find that fascinating. I mean, 83, can you imagine the magnetic poles up there?
Yeah, well, it's actually rare for Earth to only have one moon. Like, really, we're the weird ones.
Yeah, you said that last week, and I thought that was interesting. You're right. You're right. I guess I'm just so used to one moon that it seems weird to have all those moons.
Are you multi-moonophobic?
I am not. I've got a lot of moon water stuff going on in my chart. So, well, I thought it was interesting in the mythology, you know, going back to Kronos and all that. And we covered him last week because of Jupiter. But the ancient Greeks knew Saturn as Kronos, and the name was changed to Saturn by the Romans. In Greek mythology, that was Kronos was one of the Titans, the father of Zeus, Jupiter. And Cronus ate his children to prevent himself from being dethroned, right, as the king of the gods. And then Rhea tricked him. He swallowed a stone, and that's when Zeus was born. So the I think that the classical civilization viewed like the dysfunctional family drama through the way that they represented these planets. You know, so you've got this father who's fearful, so he eats his children. I mean, think about it. You know, that can really transpose into everyday life.
Yeah. We're actually going to get more into that metaphor later with the cube.
We'll see. There you go. Saturn in astrology, as far as its rotation, takes 29.5 years to go around the chart, and it spends 2.5 years in each sign. So, you have some major transits that take place with Saturn. When you start getting into these longer transits, they become more of the bigger themes in your life. So from here on out, as we begin to move towards these longer transits, you're going to see these are longer themes in life. We've left the inner planets. We've left Jupiter, the benevolent bridge, helper, facilitator, as well as Saturn. But we're still not quite out there yet, but we're headed there. And Saturn is what gets you to work your outer planets the best way. And that takes time. So Saturn is known as Father Time. But you have a Saturn return at 29, 58, and 87. And it could be 29 to 30 because it's 29 and a half years, and it depends on when you're born. So somewhere around those ages, you have what's called a Saturn return. And then throughout your life, you have the opening square Saturn at 7, and then Saturn is opposed at 14, and then it closes the square at 21, and then you begin to move into age 30, 29, 30, and by then, you've had your first Saturn return. So as you can see, you know, there's monumental times that occur, milestones, with your life at 7, and studying the child brain at 7 in my psychology studies. I'm fascinated with the way that trauma, child abuse, and family dysfunction that's repetitive, that's pretty severe, or PTSD, how it affects our ability to relate with others, and in the brain, and what areas that impacts. And so how those brains are basically they're different. So at 7 years old, there's also something that takes place. It's a monumental shift from, 7 to 8 to 9, where you're really becoming this person. You're really coming out of your childhood. You're still in childhood, but you take this monumental brain forward momentum movement in understanding and knowledge. So 7 is really, really important, and so is the corresponding 7 years that follow. So it has to work harder in Cancer, Leo, and Aquarius, and it's strong in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Libra. So wherever you have your Saturn, some keywords here are maturity, wisdom, discipline, work, authority, mastery, limits, and boundaries. Something that I wanted to read here about Saturn transferred in Aquarius, where we're at right now. Saturn's been in Aquarius for quite some time, and this is from Astrology Transits by April Elliott Kent. And she says of transiting Saturn in Aquarius, before the discovery of Uranus, Saturn was considered the ruling planet of Aquarius. In fact, many astrologers still consider this to be so. So we can assume that Saturn is very strong in Aquarius, almost as much as in Capricorn. Aquarius's goals, however, extend beyond earthly achievements. So where Saturn in Capricorn, or Saturn in a Earth sign, would be more concerned about 10th house themes of building something right now, right? Something on Earth. You see this in Capricorn in the 10th house, who runs that house. Taurus in the 2nd house, who runs that Earth house. Virgo in the 6th house, who runs that Earth house. You see these themes repetitively. But here you may have to work hard to build a career during this transit. But more important, you are building a legacy. So it moves from the Capricorn, where we've been, ironically, in Pluto, way of man structures. We know those are being crumbled and coming down. This has been the message. We're moving into a more them and us and communication in groups type of mentality, and wanting to do more than just make money. It's now about leaving a legacy, right?
Fucking God.
That's what Aquarius and Saturn is trying to get us to do. So change is in the air, but some of it is superficial and new window dressing to disguise old ideas. To get through this transit successfully, challenge not just society's rules, but also your own. So where do our rules get formed? In childhood. That's when we learn the basics of everything, which I found interesting.
That actually has a lot to do with the Saturnalia celebration about, challenging society's roles, which we'll get into at the end.
Okay. So psychologyastrology.com's a great website. I highly recommend it. And he said this on there, on Saturn. I thought this was awesome. Saturn is a separative force. He grants solitude, fear, disassociation, sorrow, insecurity, pain, loss, and facelessness. Wherever he is placed, he will bring the things to the forefront. This is the karmic script you have chosen for yourself to rebalance your outstanding karma. Saturn is always karmic duty, fear, restrictions, constrictions, budgeting yourself, making full use of what you have, etc. Okay, why is that? Why is Saturn just like, whew, man, sounds rough. Well, Saturn represents time, and everything gets better with time. Wine is extremely beneficial when aged. Whiskey in barrels, extremely beneficial when aged. Things that take time to mature often are sweeter and better. This is just the way of nature. It is the way of things. And it is also considering, this is something that I'm not saying I 100% agree with, I'm working on. I have a third house Saturn that's in Aquarius at birth, in retrograde on my fourth house cusp of home. So they say that where your trial is this life and younger, until you're about, finally Saturn releases, I think, the strongest at your second return, and this is where I am coming in March of next year. I'll have my second return. And it's like I can see this, coming full circle in ways I can't even tell you. I didn't get it the first return. I had to go through a whole nother return of 30 years. I'm not kidding. To get rid of what I brought in, which was that hardcore Capricorn 10th house professional working woman that was out every day, like the third house where my Saturn is, daily activities. That's Gemini's house. It's communication, it's air, it's the teacher, but it's not the ninth house teacher where my North Node is, incidentally, and where my karma is being released from, that third house going to the ninth. Because K2 is also, and the South Node, which is K2, is also very important to know in your chart with Saturn, because they work together, or not. But, the South Node is what you came in with, your karma, just like Saturn. So it's what you have to shed, do you see? It's what you go back to your default mode, where it's like, this is easy, I can do this. But it may not necessarily be what you're supposed to do. So I had a very abusive upbringing and a very cruel, at times, upbringing. And I just find this fascinating. It's like, wow, was I this total asshole my prior life? And if that's so, that makes me really sad. But it could be why I'm releasing so incredibly a lot of ancestral things, like alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic, but there was a lot of alcohol in my family, and incest and other types of abuse. And maybe that, because I've never abused my children that way, so maybe that was it, me completely shedding all that karma off and coming in as the mother archetype almost, with all the Cancer placements that I have. But anyway, there's something to looking at your Saturn and what it's doing in your chart, and looking at your returns and seeing the time in between there, what can help you and assist you, because there's always blessings and benefits there, because Saturn is one of those, I see him as, I don't know if I want to say friend, I just see him as a companion that will always show you the way, because he won't let you pass until you pass. Like, he won't let you go forward until your lesson's been learned and you release your karma. And some people don't. Some people don't. But I think I am, Anthony, because I get all this and I understand it. I don't think I did my last life. I think my South Node down there in the third house with Saturn, and I had a South Node in Capricorn and a Saturn in Aquarius, all in the third house. So I think I was like this teacher that wasn't very sensitive or caring at all. I think I was unkind at times because I came in with all this water and Cancer energy, the opposite of Capricorn. Isn't that interesting? There's something to it. So you've got Saturn representing duty and commitment, sacrifice, structure, boundaries, death and longevity. It's where things take time and where we must sacrifice and kill something to get something else. A complete transformation, almost like Pluto. And it can be where somebody obsesses way, way too much because you're willing to do the 10th house thing here. And have you seen people who spend too much time in their careers? It affects their sleep, their relationships, their partners, family time, their health, therefore their psychological wellness. So Saturn is really willing to stay and not give up and stay a long time. And it's the karma that we need to release from also any negative childhood trauma or patterns. You see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Oh, you know, the ancients considered Saturn a very mysterious planet and tied into this mystical planet, mystery. And its esoteric and occultic teachings and practicing and astrology and Reiki and pranic healing. It's aliens and numerology and the unknown, and it is taboo things. A lot of people don't associate that with Saturn, but if you dig into esoteric teachings, like I think you're going to tell us here, you absolutely see this.
The weirdest stuff I've heard about Saturn, just offhand, just off the top of my head, not that I've prepared, is about a golden age before, basically before the current time. In Greek mythology, there's golden age where Saturn ruled, and all the agricultural plants, all their food just sprouted out from the ground without humans having to put in any effort. And basically, what I've heard is that according to the electric universe theory, Saturn used to be a star not in this solar system, and Earth was trapped like within Saturn's gravity with Mars, and this was essentially that golden period. And the main link they draw between it is that they mention a purple hue in the sky, and the electric universe theory scientists say that there would have been like a constant purple aura in the sky.
That is fascinating, right? I mean, goodness. I thought this was interesting, and wrapping up here, Saturn is about laying down a solid and sturdy foundation like a house. So wherever Saturn is where you're meant to spend some time, energy, and examination. And the boundaries are what the rings represent, where there's certain places between certain rings, certain space, and it's all in order. It's also asking you to stay in your lane, like don't go out of your lane. Saturn is where your lane is. Meaning your lessons learned. Once it's learned and you really understand it, you'll know where to go with that Saturn. You'll just know, because it's all about honing and developing and strengthening your natural boundaries. KRS Astrology said this about Saturn. Saturn is delivering your package to your hard drive, the moon, your psyche. That this is the situation that you brought upon yourself from past life accumulation, and this is what I have to give you. I don't hate you. I don't love you. I am indifferent, but this is the package for you, and now I am on my way. The package that you receive is your own doings. I mean, that just really I think there's something to this, because when
the package is your life. I'm going to get into that with BINAH and Saturn, the Great Mother, being embodiment.
Saturn will correct you, okay? If you listen and you follow the transits and you watch how it moves through your chart in the advice and the guidance, and if you're intuitively into yourself, it's naturally going to happen. You won't even need the chart. I mean, I think this is true. There's just no doubt about it. This is why you can look at someone's chart and you can be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, yeah, how'd you know that? And you're like, well, you know, you were in the lane, man. You were where you're supposed to be. Like, you didn't have a lot of things hindering you, and you were just walking in the light. It's like when, here's how Saturn releases you. You'll go through all these trials with it, and then one day, because you stuck to it, you'll be at the right place at the right time. And all those times that you practiced that song, or all those times that you know, honed and crafted, all of a sudden, it's that person that suddenly gets noticed, right? It's that person that overnight, bam, it can flip on a dime. And it's where your gold is. Because think about this. What takes time to become beautiful is gems, right? And it takes time for water to freeze. And winter takes time. For
you know what creates gems? Fucking pressure. Stress, constriction. That's Saturn.
Right. This is Uranus square Saturn. This is what this is that we've been talking about. And it's going to activate energy. It doesn't bring the energy. It activates the energy that's already there. So it's far away from the sun by now, Saturn, and it's a cold planet. It's indifferent. And it's non-attachment, aloofness, winter, ice, cold. And interesting, if you have, like, here's how something you can play this out. Saturn conjunct Venus in a chart. This is, you know, conjunct Venus, conjunct Moon, let's say. You know, the Venus is desiring romance, and the Moon, it can dull the quality of one's sex life with Saturn here. So you see some dysfunctions when Saturn is conjunct a relational planet. And it's our hidden treasures, our gold gems, as I was saying, because pressure and time, I wrote here just like you said, pressure and time is going to cause it to have the truest, deepest lesson come out that you needed to know. And you want the roots to be deep because you got to build on it. Because the second phase is amazing. You know, you're way ahead of the game. You haven't had your first Saturn return. You're going to, and you're going to know what it's about because you're all over this stuff. And you're way ahead of the game, which is amazing. Careers are agriculture, farmer, gardeners, mechanical engineers, day-to-day teachers, where time and training can mold and shape an individual. Areas of practicality, being realistic, older, wiser, knowledge, the executor of all karma. Here's the other thing. Saturn creates a vacuum, meaning it is the space in between that can be very difficult and challenging. It's having those monumental times and shifts in Saturn where it like says, okay, I did what I did, but you're not yet where you're going, and it's that space in between. And I literally could identify this today because there's some decisions I'm making personally, and it's like, wow, I just really feel like this with my career. Like it's just kind of like my space in between thing. And I'm having my Saturn return in March of 2022, so that's pretty cool. In retrograde, real quick, really important to see if Saturn is forward or retrograde. I'm not going to go deep into this, but when a planet is retrograde, it's a redirection of the energy that goes from outward to inward. So this is somebody who has a retrograde Saturn, which you have, which I have, by the way, can be really hard on themselves, okay? This is somebody who sometimes has to do things over and over and over before they learn, but once they learn, it's quicker, and they don't make the same mistake twice. Like they learn thoroughly, they learn deeply, and they're impacted in profound ways when they learn that lesson. Like it opens things up through the sorrow and the pain and the loss that sometimes a retrograde Saturn can do.
And that's really what, you know, the Three of Swords, sorrow, is about. And of course, you know, 3 is BINAH, which is what Saturn is attributed to and all that.
Yeah, I pulled that up. Also, you know, in the zodiac chart, it puts it in Capricorn with Saturn, which is Pentacles, which is that hard-working, We'll talk about that because it sounds like you're going to bring that in. So you got deep thinkers here. When it's retrograde as well, these are the philosophers of the world. They question things extremely deeply. And it develops slower in the person's life so that success may come after either their first or second return. I found that fascinating. It doesn't operate like a normal moving Saturn. It has gone retrograde. So it's stalled out. And incidentally, Saturn does retrograde 4 to 5 months every single year. It goes into retrograde patterns because it wants to teach us these lessons. So wherever Saturn is in the sky and then in transit to your own chart, it's important to know because this is the universe helping you and your own inner world, like the two coming together. So with that, that's all I got. I will hand it over to you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful, as always. On the Kabbalistic tree of life, Saturn is attributed to the third sphere called BINAH, whose English title is understanding. So with the other spheres and the planets, the spheres were almost like extended descriptions of the planet. But this one, as you're about to see, it's not quite spot on, but you'll see how they relate. So the additional titles of BINAH are Amma, the dark sterile mother, Aima, the bright fertile mother, Cursia, the throne, Mara, the great sea. The magical image is a mature woman, a matron. So BINAH is the sphere of the great mother. This is the divine feminine. Her virtue is silence, right? Because the feminine is the passive, the masculine is the active. Very often in occult literature, you'll see a great emphasis put on silence. Of course, it's the literal silence in order to keep these secrets and all that. They keep the secret secret, but silence is also meant to be about, the reason why silence is a virtue, it's the silence of the student. It's passivity. It's knowing the value of being quiet and listening and observing and learning. That is the value of passivity. Now the vice is called avarice, which is just a fancy word for greed. It is greed because we're in the physical, right? The great mother. We're all born from the great mother. She gives us all life. She puts our souls into our bodies, right? Saturn is very much about constriction because it's about embodiment. It's about the restricting of a soul into a body. So greed obviously is the overvalue of the physical things, which is what the sphere is about. The spiritual experience, as we talked about earlier, is the vision of sorrow, which I don't really need to get into anymore. We already covered the sorrow of Saturn. The symbols, the yoni, the katis, the vesica pisces, cup or chalice. Basically, these are all symbols for vaginas. The outer robe of concealment, which is the hermetic metaphor for the body. And of course, we should consider the opposing sphere in this polarity, the sphere of the divine masculine, Shakma, whose sphere is basically the phallus, the obelisk, all, phallic objects. It's all the penis. Of course, we should worship the vagina. That's how life comes into this world. I mean, I don't see anything more apparently worthy of worship. Anyway, we're getting to some quotes from the mystical Kabbalah, as always, from Dion Fortune. BINAH, the Great Mother, sometimes also called Mara, the Great Sea, and it should also be noted that this is where Mary, as in the Virgin Mary, comes from, because, of course, the Great Mother is both she's a virgin and a whore, as we'll get into. So continuing the quote, as it is, of course, the mother of all living, and we should also note that all life evolved from the sea, Mara, the great sea, just like, all life comes from the mother, all life evolved out of the sea. She is the archetypal womb which life comes into manifestation. Whatsoever provides a form to serve life as a vehicle is of her. It must be remembered, however, that life confined in a form, although it is enabled thereby to organize and so evolve, is much less free than it was when it was unlimited, though also unorganized, on its own plane. Involvement in a form is therefore the beginning of the death of life. It is a straightening and a limiting, a binding and a constricting. Form checks life, thwarts it, and yet enables it to organize. Seen from the point of view of free-moving force, Shakma, incarceration in a form is extinction. Form disciplines force with a merciless severity. We can see then how terrible must the Great Mother appear as she binds free-moving force into the discipline of form. She is death to the dynamic activity of Shakma. Shakma force dies as it issues into the BINAH. So this is how we get the duality of the dark mother and the bright mother, the virgin and the whore.
Let me ask you this. It's interesting that it's BINAH, which is also mother. I mean, it's understanding. I get that. But it's like I remember seeing that too, and I knew you were going to cover it, so I moved away from that information. But I remember thinking, how strange, because Saturn would be to me a very strict mother. And I guess mothers have to be, right? Mothers usually are the ones that are tougher than dads. It's the wink, wink, age-old story, right?
Right.
The mother's the one that lays the law. The mother's the one that sets the rules. So it's this Saturnian.
Well, that's only our modern idea of it. In this, Kabbalistically, spiritually, classically, the feminine is the passive, right? Her virtue is silence. Like,
right.
The order giver is Jupiter. It's not really. It's order in this universe is seen as masculine, and chaos is the feminine.
Interesting.
And I have a quote on understanding specifically, and so we'll just get to it right now. Dion Fortune says on this, in regard to understanding, we get the idea of synthesis, of the perception of significance which comes when ideas are related to one another and superimposed, metaphorically speaking, upon one another, in evolutionary series from the dense to the subtle. Thus does the idea of binding together principle, BINAH principle, come once again into our minds. Right? It's about putting things together. It's understanding is basically giving a form to the force of wisdom, right? Because BINAH is understanding, wisdom is Shakma. Wisdom is like saying E equals MC squared. Like, everyone knows a little tidbit of wisdom, but who knows how to actually use that? Who knows that E is energy, M is mass, and C is the speed of light, and what to actually use that for? That's understanding.
Yeah, and that's what spending time does.
Right.
The virtuoso isn't made overnight. He's made through a series of prior commitments that all of a sudden creates an opportunity that opens up for him.
Right.
Because
so
he's ready. More
on this, why Saturn the old male is attributed to BINAH, the sphere of the Great Mother. I think this quote has really kind of made it more clear to me. Kether is pure being, all potential but non-active. When a flowing forth of activity takes from it, we call that activity Shakma. It is this descending stream of pure activity which is the dynamic force of the universe, and all dynamic force belongs to this category. The emanation continues to BINAH. The Kabbalists state that BINAH is emanated by Chakma. Let us translate this statement to other terms. It is an occultist maxim which is, I believe, confirmed by the researches of Einstein, though I have not the knowledge necessary to correlate his findings with esoteric doctrine, that force never moves in a straight line, but always in a curve vast as the universe, and therefore eventually returns whence it issues forth, but upon a higher arc. For the universe has progressed since it started. It follows, then, that force proceeding thus, dividing and redividing and moving at tangential angles, will eventually arrive at a state of interlocking stresses and some manner of stability, a stability which tends to be overset in the course of time as fresh forces are emanated into manifestation and introduce new factors with which adjustment has to be made.
Well, it ties in perfectly with esoteric ruler of Capricorn, Saturn,
Right.
representative of the law of economy on all levels of the personality. It's not an agent of deprivation as much as it is a testing ground to prove a person's level of maturity and responsibility in dealing what he has learned or achieved.
Right. So
that was off of mermaid.uk.net on Esoteric Saturn.
Right. So Saturn is an old male in BINAH, the Great Mother, because force is identified to Shakma. And the idea is when force has been around long enough, eventually, with time, it becomes more stable. It becomes, more wise. It gets that understanding.
Well, it's fascinating, Saturn being used, in these papyri that we see, and the symbolism showing up of Saturn, and that this archetype's been around for a very long time.
There used to be an understanding that all these energies in the universe are necessary, right? And now everything's thrown into like a dark light, good, evil dichotomy, and a lot of people equate Saturn with Satan being evil. And Fortune actually has something to say about that, which is pretty elucidating. It will thus be seen that if Kether, the source of all being, is conceived of as the highest good, as it inevitably must be, and the nature of Kether is kinetic, and its influence is forever inclined towards Shakma, it inevitably follows that BINAH, the opposite of Shakma, the perpetual opposer of dynamic impulses, will be regarded as the enemy of God, the evil one. Saturn-Satan is an easy transition, and so is time-death-devil. Implicit in the ascetic religions such as Christianity and Buddhism is the idea that woman is the root of all evil, because she is the influence which holds men to a life of form by their desires. Matter is regarded by them as the antimony of spirit, and as such to be abrogated and overcome. This unhappy belief has caused much human suffering in Christian countries as war and pestilence.
My goodness, isn't that interesting where that ties into that?
All right, so we have to have a healthy relationship with all these essential energies of the universe, even if it might not be bright and happy on the surface. We have to be fucking adults, guys.
Yeah, that's really, really poignant. And it can't be all feelings. This is where Saturn is that cold, detached father, Chronos, time.
Right.
That will let you learn your lesson.
So a lot of these, Saturn, Satan people like to obsess over the black cube of Saturn. Especially one of my pet peeves is hearing people on conspiracy podcasts talk about occult shit, and they never have any understanding about this occult shit. They just found some tidbits of wisdom here and there. So I'm going to educate you guys on the cube, right? So as we talked about last week with Saturn swallowing his children, these next quotes are from Lon Milo Duquette's Understanding Aleister Crowley's Book of Thoth, and this is from the chapter before he begins to explain the cards, where it's just general background information on all the shit magical type, esoteric type shit you should know before you even begin to try to understand these cards. So he begins to explain the cube, and he describes it as a white cube, and he doesn't even say it's of Saturn. But I'm telling you, this is the same cube, because this is what he says about this cube. As long as the cube is sealed, creation is put on hold. That is exactly the meaning of the metaphor of Saturn swallowing his children. And I wanted to share you guys why the cube represents the universe. And this blew my mind the first time I read it. Wow. So I wanted to share it with you guys. In order to be a cube, a point needs to be extended into 3 dimensions: up, down, right, left, and front, back. These 3 dimensions create 7 positions, the center and 6 sides, that create 12 oblique points or edges to the cube. 3 plus 7 plus 12 equals 22. 22 pass on the tree of life, 22 trump cards in the tarot deck. Kabbalistic tradition tells us this is how deity formed the 22 letters of sacred Hebrew alphabet, which by all things in creation are verbally ordered into existence. And this is why it's undeniable that the 22 trumps of the tarot and the 22 paths on the tree of life and the 22 Hebrew letters are inevitably connected. You cannot separate them. You cannot pretend that tarot has nothing to do with Kabbalah. So, continuing. The Hebrew alphabet is divided into 3 mother letters attributed to the 3 primitive elements: fire, water, air. We have 3 trump cards for those. 7 double letters attributed to the 7 planets of the ancients, and 12 simple letters attributed to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And of course, that is all 22 cards of the major arcana. And again, as long as the cube is sealed, creation is put on hold. And these 22 magic power letters, these dimensions and positions and concepts remain suspended in a state of brooding potentiality. And they are like the invisible germ in the heart of the acorn that throbs with the potential of an eternity of future oak trees. In order for the sealed tube to initiate creation, it must sacrifice itself upon a cross by bursting open like a kernel of popcorn. So now, you can look this up, animations or drawings of this. The cube unfolds into a cross. So, as we know, the cross is the sign, is a symbol of Tippereth, which is the highest sphere below the abyss. Well, actually, it's the highest sphere humans can reach below the abyss, more specifically. So as we see this cube metaphor, the Saturn swallowing his children, it's a metaphor for a specific state in the progression of the creation of the universe. That's all it is.
Right. A cross when folded creates a cube.
Yes. Well, the cube unfolded creates a cross.
Right. In esoteric symbolism, the number 22 is represented by a cube or square, which in turn represents the Earth physical plane. A cross when folded creates a cube. This is mastermindcontent.cu.uk. And it's showing a big black cube that all these worshippers are around. But it doesn't tell me where this picture was taken, but it looks very Middle Eastern.
Yeah, there's one, I think, in Jerusalem that Muslims, and I think maybe Jews also might worship. And I also heard of a black cube at the Vatican.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we could talk about the Vatican a while sometime.
So that's what the black cube is really about. And we'll end on a lighter note, a more fun note. We'll talk about Saturnalia, because if you don't know, around right now when we're recording this, Saturnalia was originally December 17th, 18th, and 19th, but has been extended to 3 and 7 days throughout history.
Yep.
So it is, I'm just reading a little bit from the Wikipedia now, just some light fun reading. Although probably the best known Roman holiday, Saturnalia is not described from beginning to end in any single ancient source. Modern understanding of the festival is placed together from several accounts dealing with various aspects. So it's hard to get a completely comprehensive idea of exactly what went on. Really, we just have pieces of the past, just to be clear. So this is coming from Macrobius, who, a historian we mentioned a couple episodes ago. He says, Saturnalia is a festival of light leading to the winter solstice, with the abundant presence of candles symbolizing the quest for knowledge and truth. The renewal of light and the coming of the new year was celebrated in the later Roman Empire at the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, or the birthday of the unconquerable sun, on the 25th of December, Roman god of the sun being Sol Invictus. So mainly people want to draw some kind of connection between Saturnalia and Christmas, when really the Roman sun god was called Sol Invictus and they celebrated his birth on December 25th.
Isn't that fascinating? And most people don't know that, you know, and it's beautiful to see. And, you know, it's celebrated, this Christmas, Saturnalia, different names, Yule, all over the world. So there's something to this archetype, right?
Yes.
That has many blessings, absolutely. On thoughtcatalog.com, I was looking for, you know, I know this has been like a heavy conversation call because Saturn is serious. You know, Saturn, think about it, you know, in mythology.
Well, we're about to change that.
Right.
Because Saturnalia was not serious. Saturnalia seems very fun, very chaotic, very Pan-like, who Saturn is also attributed to.
Yes,
I saw that. Saturnalia was characterized by role reversals and behavioral license. As you mentioned before, your Saturn return should be a time of questioning society's roles and your role in society. So to do that, slaves were treated to a banquet of the kind usually enjoyed by their masters. Ancient sources differ on the circumstances. Some suggest that master and slave dined together, while others indicate that the slaves feasted first or that the masters actually served the food. The practice might have varied over time. And also, what I attribute this to, the questioning society, as I mentioned last week, even though on the tree of life, the polarity that is made with Jupiter is Jupiter-Mars, Jupiter-Saturn also makes an interesting polarity, where Jupiter is very much the civilized rule of law and order, and Saturn is very much about nature, tooth and claw, fucking chaos. So that's kind of where I see this coming from. So to continue, the toga, the characteristic garment of the male citizen, was set aside in favor of the Greek synthesis, colorful dinner clothes, otherwise considered in poor taste for daytime wear. Roman citizen status normally went out bareheaded, but for the Saturnalia donned the pileus, a conical felt cap that was the usual mark of a freed man. Slaves who ordinarily were not entitled to wear the pileus wore it as well, so that everyone was pileated without distinction. Everyone got pilled. So if you had to consider during this time, slavery was a legal institution, so this was another way of saying fuck you to social norms. So I'm continuing to say fuck you to institutions and just having a good time. Gambling and dice playing, normally prohibited or at least frowned upon, were permitted for all, even slaves. Coins and nuts were the stakes. On the calendar of Philocalus, the Saturnalia is represented by a man wearing a fur-trimmed coat next to a table with dice and a caption reading, "Now you have license, slave, to game with your master." Rampant overeating and drunkenness became the rule and the sober person the exception. Very Pan.
Yeah.
And here, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Nope.
And here we get a little bit Christmassy at the end. There's a few more traditions. The Sigillaria on 19th December was a day of gift giving, because gifts of value would mark social status contrary to the spirit of the season. These were often pottery or wax figurines called sigillaria, made specifically for the day. Candles or gag gifts, of which Augustus was particularly fond. So again, gifts, because Saturn's about embodiment, the physical, but it's all about turning everything on your head. So you would want to give, right here they say, here we go, Marshall suggests that token gifts of low intrinsic value inversely measure the high quality of a friendship. So you would want to give your friend a shit gift, otherwise it would be seen like, what are you trying to buy my friendship?
Oh my goodness. Interesting.
That's more of a fun, lighthearted Christmas, because the one thing a lot of people hate about Christmas is, oh, I gotta do all the shopping, I gotta give gifts, and oh no, I don't want you to give me a gift because I'm gonna have to fucking get you a gift, just fucking stop this. No. Saturnalia, the gifts were purposely cheap and shitty, and getting an expensive gift was like an insult.
That's crazy, right?
Yup.
Well, that was the way that they handled it.
So continue with getting a little Christmassy, in a practice that might be compared to modern greeting cards versus sometimes accompany the gifts. Marshall has a collection of poems written as if to be attached to gifts. Catullus received a book of bad poems by the worst poet of all times as a joke from a friend. One thing that I just, for some reason I felt I had to include, I didn't want to like sugarcoat it, that in sources of the 3rd century AD and later, Saturn is recorded as receiving dead gladiators as offerings during or near the Saturnalia. These gladiatorial events, 10 days in all throughout December, were presented mainly by the quaestors, politicians, and sponsored with funds from the treasury of Saturn.
Wow.
Hey, I mean, if it's about embodiment, what better offering than a body if you're going to do gladiator events anyway?
Yeah, yeah. Serious nature. That can be also hard. Do you know what I mean?
Being born into a body means dying.
Right.
There's some pretty cool shit you can do in a body, too.
This is true. This is true, but it's all about shedding, that karma that you bring in and then walking into what you need to, and the sooner the better. But unfortunately, some things just take time. But as we're seeing the energies coming in now, these things are happening quicker. And especially since we've had Saturn in Aquarius, which is where it is right now, it gives you that social justice and fairness when it's in Aquarius, like you were talking about, things being more democratically minded. This is where we're going. And I think that the Sabian symbol for tonight's Saturn is really on point, and I wanted to read it, if that's okay.
Perfect thing to end on.
All right, so this is the Goldsmith Revised Sabian for our Aquarius position tonight, and Saturn happens to be in this position, so the layer of Saturn is there, but this is what Aquarius has to say in this degree, and it is conjunct Acephalus, who will not leave us. Acephalus is following us. It's part of our podcast. It always seems to come out in a very prominent position. It is right next to Saturn, and Acephalus is investigation of illness and your health. It's in the 7th house, and it's also conjunct the asteroid Eros, which is sexuality, reproductive organs, the heart and cardiac system in the body, the history and experience and behavioral repertoire of eroticism, what turned you on, the will to live, your passion, your life, all in the 7th house there with Saturn, of Libra in Aquarius, though. Double air energy, a lot of communication. What are we talking about tonight to other people? Saturn. Where is Saturn? In the 7th house of others. Isn't that ironic? The other thing is the theme in relationships and how's this affecting your house. So take a look at your Saturn. Maybe this was a message for some people tonight to be like, wow, maybe I really need to look at what's going on here and how it's affecting my relationships. Because Venus went retrograde. It's going back into conjunction with Pluto. Remember we talked about this last week, and then it's going to release again, but it's going back just in time for Christmas.
Interesting.
And a Cancer moon for Christmas. So, guys, wow. Coming out of a Cancer moon, I should say, for Christmas. Christmas is the 26th, so we'll be moving out of that moon, but this energy is what's bringing us in. So, Saturn, to close, the Sabian symbol for Aquarius with Saturn sitting there is A man climbs to the top of a mountain where he meditates and receives a powerful vision. Afterwards, he descends to the city below, holding the outlines of the new plan. Seeking a higher level of awareness, arriving at a lofty overview of one's situation, a mystical union with God, setting one's sights on a worthwhile goal, and pausing to reflect and plan how one can actively arrive at that goal. Negatively acting impulsively without considering the consequences of one's actions. Remember, Aquarius is air energy. It can go out. It's fixed. But with other transits and other aspects, it can be impulsive. Desire to set the new world in order. Moses-like sense of duty to the tribe. Seeking the political and social problems of one's society with startling clarity, trying to awaken the populace versus using their hypnotized state to manipulate them. Arrogant sense of superiority, setting forth one's plan with exactitude and clarity, manifestos and blueprints, inspiring or converting people by sharing a unifying vision, taking one's place in the larger scheme of things. Do you hear the Aquarian undertones there?
Of course, yes.
Very, very, very strong, wanting to have us reach out and build our structures in a communal way that's beneficial to all, not just the self, but to all. It would be Aquarius wanting the others in the group, in the communication. So,
the Aquarius doesn't really have much sympathy for the individual, so I guess that Saturnian influence is where that comes from.
It is. It's indifferent. It doesn't really feel. But hey, let's close with this positive things of Saturn. Okay? It's a truth teller. This is off of thoughtcatalog.com.
You're going to be glad you got that lesson he taught you after he teaches it to you, but you're not going to be happy before that.
Faithful are the wounds of a friend, deceitful the kisses of an enemy.
Yes.
Right? Your friend will lay you straight, doesn't play games, doesn't beat around the bush. Saturn is a humbler. So, you learn your lessons and you grow, and then you don't have to repeat them, but it will humble you. And Saturn is a righteous judge, which means it does judge righteously. You had alluded to that. Like, it has a sense. It has a sense. And it has vision. It's a giver of strength. Because Saturn may delay, but he doesn't deny. Always remember that. He never denies. And when it comes in, it is some sweet buttered biscuits, let me tell you. With some honey on top. It is good stuff. Saturn is a teacher, so it's where you're going to learn your greatest lessons and will grant you respect, which I thought was interesting. Saturn is the signifier of career and authority. Saturn is the original lord of the 10th house and 11th house, indicating what you will actually receive in this lifetime through your own work and efforts. Saturn, in turn, will be the planet that will give you a sense of authority in the house it's placed because you have experienced the harshest aspects in that house and will allow others to respect your opinion and see you as a guide. So, simplification, Saturn just gets rid of the clutter, gets rid of the dross, brings truer connection, and is better than Jupiter because the obstacles give you resilience, and the gems come through, like we said, the pressure and time.
Right, when you're comfortable, comfort doesn't help you improve. When you're comfort, you're not, there's no fire under your ass forcing you to improve every day. It's the challenges that force you to get better.
Boy, it's really true. And you don't feel like that when you're going through it. You just don't. You just don't. And I can attest to that. Not every day. Like you were alluding to, too, you talked about, this duality we live in. And, it can't be like black is bad and white is good.
Right. That's just an immature way of seeing things. That's like how a child sees things.
Right.
Everything's bad or good, good and evil. Right. We're taught to basically just be sheep. Don't think.
Right. So because we're talking about all these topics that we talk about here on these podcasts, this is a sign of things changing. This kind of knowledge getting out, and not just us, many people talking about these types of things. And so what we're seeing is Saturn bringing some rewards, in that now that we've been through the whole Capricorn thing, we're moving into the Aquarius Saturn, which is what we're in, which is the more others, where we're able to express the information because we've learned it. Do you see? It's pretty interesting how that works.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, guys.
Good night.